On December 17, 1903, the Wright brothers flew the world's first airplane in powered, controlled flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Airborne 12 seconds, 120 feet, that flight changed the world. Just 11 years later, the U.S. Army began ordering a new airplane to train pilots. It was a Glenn Curtiss plane that became the JN-4, nicknamed the Jenny. More than 8,100 were produced, and 95% of American pilots learned to fly the Jenny. Some Jennies were modified and flew combat in World War I. When the war ended in 1919, there were thousands of surplus Jennies. For $300, pilots bought Jennies and popularized civil aviation. Barnstorming, stunt flying, wing walking, and flying air shows across the country. By the late 1920s, aircraft designers in the United States and Europe were churning out new planes with new capabilities. The Army needed a new primary pilot trainer, and the Stearman Aviation Company created that plane. The Stearman. More than 10,000 were produced for $11,000 each. It was that plane that trained American pilots until the end of World War II. When World War II ended, the Army Air Corps again needed a new aircraft to fit the current military needs, without a tail wheel, not a tail dragger, realizing that future combat aircraft, fighters and bombers, props and jets would need a tricycle landing gear with a nose wheel. So, in the late 1940s, Beechcraft created the T-34A Mentor, and North American Aviation created the T-28A. The Navy needed a bigger engine on both. The test pilot on the Navy version, T-28B, was Bob Hoover.
There's something about the unknown, and that's why I was so disappointed that I didn't get to make the first flight on the X-1. Every day you go out, you have no idea what the rest of the day it has in store for you. And you get used to that. The adrenaline flows, and you get excited about it, and you feel motivated, because if you can damage the enemy, that's why you're there. And I had been doing aerobatics, and I was sought after to perform and demonstrate different types of airplanes all over the world. And I enjoyed every one of those flights because they were in different countries and before people that were enthusiastic about flying and wanted to know more about it. And that in itself was another bit of adrenaline flowing, because I can tell you for a fact, you couldn't imagine how many accidents I've seen in my lifetime where the pilots didn't survive.
These airplanes trained American pilots for 7 decades. They served during the Korean War and Vietnam, all the way through to the Gulf Wars. To tell us more about these 2 legendary airplanes, please welcome the owners and operators of these iconic aircraft as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the T-34 and the T-28.
Well, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Julia, Scott, and Kyle for putting together such a great video. Sam not only served our country for many years, but he flew the B-17 for decades out here and the Ford Tri-Motor. And next Sunday, he celebrates his 91st birthday. So I think we could give him a hand for that. A lot of service to EAA. Well, thanks, guys. Go ahead and sit down, get comfortable. Thank you for coming out. It's outside. At least it's not as bright as sun as it was 5 years ago. Our heads were getting a little bit scorched. But these two planes are very popular right now. The values of them have shot up. But they've also, their history, they mark some milestones for the military. Okay? One was mentioned, was that they were nose wheel planes, and they knew the jets and the cargo planes were going to be nose wheel. the T6 was a great trainer, pilot maker, but there was no need to learn how to fly a tail wheel if you're going to fly an F-86. So Walter Beech used his own money to develop the T-34. It actually first flew in December of 1948, but the military wanted a few changes. In 1949, a very small lady, similar to another small lady I know, petite, named Betty Skelton, great aerobatic pilot, great race car driver. She was asked by Walter Beech to parade it around the military bases. And Julie can tell us some more about that. And the military liked what they saw because it was low maintenance. A steerman, you got to recover it every so many years. Back then they used grade A cotton. So every 5 or 6 years, you were going, we still got empty seats here if you want to come in. Just keep on coming in. You had to recover it. So they were very high maintenance, the steermans. And the other 50,000 trainers they made during World War II. They didn't use aluminum then because that was a strategic metal. It was a stave for the fighters and the bombers. So unfortunately, Walter Beech was sick, ill. He would die a few years later. And the Navy and the Air Force didn't pick the T-34 up until 1953. Things were heating up in Korea at that time, right? 1949. North American and the military had a good relationship with the T-6, the P-51, the B-25. And they went to North American and said, build us a plane that makes it easy to transition from that trainer to a jet fighter. And at the time, North American was turning out the F-86 Sabres by the thousands. So they built this plane, and the military wanted it so badly. 2 weeks after the prototype flew, they said, okay, build another 300 of them for us. And then they added on to that order. So the total T-28As, the first version, they made over 1,100 of them. Korea was hot. They said, we need a lot of trainers. So they went into the Air Force. And then later, the Navy would develop it. So that's kind of the history. They marked the milestone, the first planes to have nose wheels as a trainer. And actually, because the military didn't pick up the T-34 until 53, the T-28 was the first plane to be a nose wheel prop-driven trainer in the military. Also, it marked the end of something. Does anybody know what might have been the last trainer to have a radial engine? So the T-28 was the last with a radial engine. So here are some people. Myself, I'm an aviation historian. My wife, who's up here, she convinced us that we needed a T-28, and she said, we only got to keep it 2 years. That was 24 years ago. So, and then about 7 years later, she said, we could save a lot of money if we buy a T-34 and fuel. So we bought a T-34. So we've owned both for quite some time.
Smart wife.
Yeah. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tom here. And Tom can tell us about his introduction. I mean, he was one of the people that this plane was built for to teach, and your experiences.
Thank you, Paul. As Paul said, the trainer
both the 34 and the 28 were designed specifically in mind with people with no prior flight time. And I sit here before you as that exact example. I had grown up in New York City. Our car died when I was 12. I never drove a car until I got into, and then came down to Navy flight training to begin the journey that would last 27, almost 28 years. My first introduction was the 34 Bravo at Softly Field in 1974. I had a Marine Corps instructor, 2 combat tours in Vietnam, and said, Tom, let's go. I understand you have no prior flight time, and we're going to teach you how to fly. Saluting the good Iron Cap, they said, let's go. On my first 3 flights, I failed to be able to taxi the aircraft into the chocks. Now, that is not a good thing to be seen on the ramp, where a white hat or a Navy enlisted personnel would come out with a tow bar and unceremoniously drag you into the chocks. On the 3rd event like that, taxiing next to us was his friend, who would later become a 3-star general named Lieutenant General McCorkle, who was yelling over to my instructor, Mike Henderson, saying, you can't even teach a kid how to taxi. Well, with that, I thought we had an ejection seat in the back, and out popped my instructor, red in the face, looking at me like about this far and saying, what is with you? Just get out of the damn plane and let's go. So as I'm pondering my short naval aviator career, and we're double-stepping it back to the debriefing space, we're about 10 feet from the door that swings into the area, and he says, stop. Which I then looked up and he says, what is it with you about not being able to taxi this plane? I said, sir, well, quite honestly, I've never driven a car, which I obviously failed to tell him on the initial interview. He says, let me get this right. You've never driven a car and you've never flown a plane. Do I have that right, Candidate Donovan? Yes, sir. Great. Follow me. As he dragged me into the ready room and proceeded to tell his friend McCorkle that here is the real story. That was the way I got introduced to the T-34 Bravo, as well as to the rest of Navy flight training. You can look at then on to T-28. The unique thing here I'm here for is because I flew both this as a student, the T-34 Bravo, and then a year and a half later as an instructor, and I also flew the T-28 as a student and an instructor. Their stability in the aircraft, the ability to do precision maneuvering, instrument approaches are renowned. And I am testimony to that today, having gone through and got my wings back in 1976. As a little add-on, Paul, 10 years later, I would come back and screen for command and have a command of a primary T-34 Charlie squadron, of which I would then tell the students, I'm your lowest common denominator. If you can taxi a plane and you can solo, you got me right at the get-go. So that's where I got exposed to flight training, these 2 beautiful aircraft, and fond memories.
So you've flown both the T-34 Bravo, you flew the T-28, and you later flew the turbine version of this.
That's correct.
T-34.
Yep.
And did you ever get your driver's license?
Well, well, thanks, Paul, for asking. I almost forgot.
That was good.
Well, I got my wings in April of '76 on a Friday. My folks drove down from New York City. On Monday, I was at the DMV getting my road test from what turned out to be a 6'3" state trooper with the Smokey the Bear hat. And he looked down the aisle with me and about 3 other guys. They all had long hair. I obviously did not. And he reached over the counter to the lady that processed us. He says, I'll take him. And I'm looking up, I go, what did I do to deserve this attention? Because the other people had been in there before me. He goes, you're mine. With that, I got out into the car, started up my friend's car. He says, let's go. Now, I had been in the DMB test area on Saturday and Sunday to practice all the maneuvers, so I was all pumped. Well, we proceeded to go 20 feet. He says, turn right. Went another 20 feet, turn right again. And then finally, the last 20 feet, he turned right, said, shut it down, congratulations, and good luck with your future. And so that was my first introduction to a Texas State Trooper and my transition to my first driver's license.
Wow, you had your wings first, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And for the people sitting out in the stands here, we still have some empty places if you want to come and sit down. So, in this set. Next, we'll have somebody that doesn't need an introduction, Julie Clark. And I hope you've read her book, Nothing Stood in Her Way. And when I read it, it's just humbling. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, your father, Julie, was the first airline commercial pilot that was murdered in a hijacking.
Yes.
And you were in your teens?
I was 15.
She was 15. So that's kind of a real setback, but it doesn't set Julie back. And so tell us on your relationship to not only the T-34, but the T-28, and maybe later we'll get into, she might have got into some air shows. So go ahead.
Yeah. I also lost my mom when I was 14 in a choking accident, so now all of a sudden I was orphaned. But I had taken several flights with my dad. I'm going to really date myself now when I say the DC-3, the F-27, the Martin 404. And I always knew, even after his accident, that I wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't want to just be an airline pilot. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be an airline pilot. But now, mind you, this would be in the 50s. Yeah, that's right. And so it was a battle, not only financially, but trying to break through that door to become an airline pilot. And that's a big part of my book. And like he said, nothing stood in her way, Captain Julie Clark. But the T-34 came around so by mistake. I was married to a Navy pilot back in the 70s. He flew A-7s, and we were at Navy Lemoore. And at that point, I was flying incubated babies for Valley Children's Hospital in Fresno, and I was a flight instructor, and I'd worked all this way up. I restored antique clocks. I worked at Charlie Brown's restaurant till 2 a.m., and at 6:30 in the morning, I'd be back at San Carlos Airport taking a flying lesson. And, you go there with your tips and say, how many lessons can I get out of all this change? But it was a hard battle. And so I'm married to my Navy pilot husband, and he had mentioned about all my flying time. So I was actually asked to run the ground school for the B models, and the T-34B models, not knowing anything about it. I'd flown my first T-34 in 1974. So next thing I know, I transitioned into being a civilian instructor at NAS Lemoore. Even after my husband got rifted, I had to stay on board at Lemoore, and he's out getting an airline job. But that was my first taste of a T-34, and I learned formation flying. I learned the ACM, which is Air Combat Maneuvers, and I really fell in love with that airplane. And I remember the last day I pulled the mixture back, the airplane shut down. I thought, man, I'll never fly one of these again. Why was I wrong? So anyway, now we fast forward. I get hired with the airlines in 1976. I'm one of the very first women to fly for a major carrier, first for my airline. And we formed ISA plus 21. And maybe some people here know it's a big organization for International Social Affiliation of Women Airline Pilots. And now it's been changed to, I can't remember what the ISA is now, but Society of Women Airline Pilots. So I'm one of the original 21. And again, that just means I'm old.
You're old. Experience.
So yeah. So now we're going to fast track back to my first year flying with, it was Hughes Air West, then we became Republic, Northwest, and my pension says Delta. So it's all good, right? And so I got involved in competition aerobatics in Phoenix, Arizona. I was flying a Pitts in competition, and I really got into it. I was just really focused on this aerobatic competition. But then one day I'm flying some attorneys when I'm still building flight time, and I saw an ad for a T-34, and it said 2 A-45s. So I knew right away that those were T-34s. And they were on a government surplus sealed bid. And this is before I really quite got on with the airlines. This is 1976. And so I didn't tell my husband, but I thought, man, that'd be so cool to own one of these, you know? So I bid on it. And I had to get $1,000 from a girlfriend of mine who was a school teacher, because I didn't have $1,000 to make the bid. And then I decided to bid $1,000 over the original bid, which was $17,000. So I bid $18,000 for this airplane. So now fast forward, I'm now on with the airlines. I'm getting involved in this competition aerobatics because I didn't find out about the bid for about 6 months. And then all of a sudden I get a call from Maxwell Air Force Base, and that's in Alabama. But the airplane was up in Alaska. So I was told that I had a phone call from Maxwell. I said, what was that about? And this secretary there said, something about a T-Fort. I said, a T-34? Yeah, you now own one. And I remember going, oh my God. So I hadn't told my husband, but to make a long story short, I asked him to go up and have a nice fun trip and fly this airplane back, and he was very upset with me. So I went solo up to Elmendorf Air Force Base, and that is where I bought this airplane. I go in there in a taxi cab the morning I get there, and I don't know anything about A models. They're very subtle changes, right?
Right.
Right, Paul? But enough to you kind of have to figure out what you're doing there. But to make a long story short, it's very low clouds, it's pouring down rain, and they're spray painting my airplane where it said U.S. Air Force with spray paint, you know. And I said, oh, what do you guys do? Now, mind you, I'm like 27, 28 years old. I'm just a young buck. And he said, this airplane's leaving Air Force Command duty. By the way, when are you leaving? I said, well, not today.
Not right now.
Not right now. So I did a little research on the airplane, but my trip home, I could have written a book just about that, and I'll just tell this a little bit about this story. They were saying the best way to get out of here is go up through Windy Pass to Whitehorse and then down through Canada, the Alcan Highway, which back then, it wasn't a highway, it was a trench. And so I left late in the afternoon, and this is in June, so it's light for a long time. But to make a long story short, I never did find Windy Pass, and when I finally got to Whitehorse, I saw that my compass was 45 degrees off from the back compass, and the back compass was the correct one. So that night I slept in a women's bathroom at the airport. I swapped compasses and continued on my way. And then as I finally found the Alcan Highway, I'm heading down the highway, and I tell people, this is what I was flying along going, oh my God, my husband's gonna kill me when he sees this airplane. And I started smelling a really weird smell, and I told people it kind of smelled like baked potatoes. But and oh, by the way, the amp meter didn't work, the voltmeter didn't work. There's a lot of things that did not work in this airplane. As it ends up, it was the battery overheating, and then there's this big, huge bang, and through the side of my foot, I was being covered in battery acid. And so I remember opening the canopy going, oh my gosh, I'm not going to survive this. And all I kept thinking was it didn't really matter, because when I get home, my husband's going to kill me anyway. But I had this big airline career to face. But anyway, I found a gravel strip, because I saw like a high-wing Cessna. So I landed there, and they said, what can we do with you, little missy? And I said, well, I think I've got a big battery problem, and I was just covered in acid. So we ended up getting it started, and it's a 24-volt system. And in the 70s, little airplanes did not have 24-volt systems. So the whole rest of the flight, I was trying to get down to LA, where I was getting my flight training for the airlines, and I'm still up in Whitehorse, just coming down the Alcan Highway. So the whole rest of the flight was a wet compass and the gear down, and somehow I got through customs, but I had to call every airport in Canada that had airlines so that they could give me the light gun so that I could land and get 24-volt start cart, and that's how I came home. So the flight home was just awful. So anyway, I get home, and sure enough, my husband was not happy with it. And I'll now fast forward. I got involved with three other guys that had T-34s, and I joined a flight team, and we were called the Falcons, and we flew mostly for the CAF, did Harlingen and other Texas shows, and all three of those guys are now deceased. But I remember in 1980, I was doing all the marketing. I was begging them to do practice, and they didn't want to practice. One ran a beer company. Another one was very wealthy and always traveling. So I said, you know what, you guys, I'm going to just go solo in this. And I remember this guy, Ed, said, solo in a T-34? good luck with that. And I said, well, because it's kind of, it's a nice airplane, but it's a boring airplane to just, you got to have something to make it memorable. So anyway, I started flying solo in 1980 in air shows. Did my first show here in 1984, thanks to Dwayne Cole, who really was my mentor. But I started putting the act to music and Colored Smoke, and I first used to fly to Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World, and I love that song, but the song was too short. And then in 1983, I heard Lee Greenwood's song, and I'm very patriotic. Oh, I didn't mention I came up with the paint job of Air Force One, and I checked out a library book called The Flying White House. That's how I came up with the paint scheme. And so I started flying Lee Greenwood's. I had big sponsorships with Mopar, Chevron, Juice Plus, now Tempest. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to get sponsorships. And they really look at you very carefully to make sure you are safe and do everything safely. And but I think the key to my success was putting it into a theme, to music, Colored Smoke, and something that people remember. And people would come up to me after and they'd just be crying and say, oh my God, your song, your air patrol just made me cry. And I said, that's because you're patriotic. And that's how I kind of made a name with this airplane. I have 11,000 hours in this airplane, just this airplane. And this is my 9th engine. So the old girl's been worn out, but she still treats me good. And I've been on the board of directors with the T-34 Association. I served for 33 years. We had a rough road of about 11 years with this wing spar issue, so they had me be like what they called the fleet leader, and we had to remove my wings and do this eddy current every 20 hours, and it was brutal, but we got through it, and then the T-34 Association presented me with the Barron spars. But I do want to make a comment about, and then I'll talk about Betty Skelton real quick. Charlie Nogle, and all the Warbird guys have known him. I got to tell you about my first time coming here in '79. I didn't find much going on here. The airplane just looked awful. They parked me out in the weeds, and I camped under my airplane. And so I'm taxiing out, thinking, well, I've been here for 3 days. I've seen enough. So I'm taxiing out, engines running through the grass, and a guy jumps up on my wing as I'm moving, and I'm going, oh shit. Wow. Oh, Connie Boland doesn't, sorry, Connie. So I pulled the mixture back and opened the canopy. I said, hi, what's up? And he said, I'm Charlie Nogle. And I said, you're Charlie Nogle? It was like the T-34 guy just jumped on my wing. Because he was Mr. T-34. And that began a friendship. And he and Judd, they just maintained this airplane for my entire airshow career. If there was ever a problem, I'd bring it to them. They put me in front and got me back. I never missed an air show in 41 years due to maintenance. And I was doing about 25 shows a year, especially when I was flying with Mopar. So it's been a great career, and this airplane has really served me well. I will say one thing about Betty Skelton. I got to know her in Vero Beach when I was flying all these shows down at Sun and Fun. And when I found out, she raced for Chrysler, and I was Mopar. So we had this great friendship, and I used to have dinner with her and just, man, I couldn't keep up with her on that wine drinking, but we had a lot of fun. So a great woman and a great ambassador that kind of test flew these airplanes back in, I guess, the late 40s, early 50s.
And if you go to the museum, you can see her pits, and it has a little skunk on it.
Yeah.
She was known as Little Stinker.
Little Stinker, yeah. So,
well,
we'll move on.
I've made people cry too when I fly, but it wasn't, I think it was the way I flew that made them cry. I was at the University of Illinois in 1970, and I can remember taking my $1,500 Cessna 120 down to Charlie Nogle's at Tuscola, just south. And I thought, who in their right mind would spend $10,000 for a two-place Bonanza, which is what I saw. The cheapest ones you see now are $180,000 on up, full restorations are astronomical, so.
I didn't mention about my T-28. Should I bring that up?
She's got a T-28 too.
Back in 1996, I had been checked out on a T-28 in California. So I never really thought I wanted one, but I bought one in 1996, and I traded my Debonair with a smoke system and $50,000 for a yellow airplane that didn't even fly. And so I got a ferry permit, but anyway, I had Top Banana. I don't know if people remember the Top. I brought it here for 9 years, flew with the T-28 guys. guys. And it was a great airplane, and I just recently sold it to a gentleman up in Brookings, Oregon. He kept the same livery of the Top Banana, which was Hughes Air West, the airline that hired me. And yes, 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 Hughes Air West, Top Banana in the West. Who knows that? Nobody would raise their hand. Way before you guys. But anyway, I love that airplane, and now my better half, Mike, who just bought a T-34, goes, maybe we should buy a T-20. I go, don't go there. So, but it's a great airplane. I just think that, and you bought a jewel there. I knew Ralph very well and did a lot of flying with him in this exact airplane.
Well, thank you,
I guess
Julie.
I've talked long enough. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And next is Mick Thorstensen. He's been flying T-28s, and he flew other T-34s for a long time. He still holds an aerobatic, aerobatic competency, an ACE card, low level. So go ahead. Tell us about your experiences.
Well, hey, hi, good afternoon. Just going to stand up here a little bit and just tell a little bit about. My name is Mick Thorstensen. I was a Navy pilot, started in 1971 and did 23 years in the Navy. But as a start out, ended up flying the T-34Bs, and it was a wonderful airplane. And before I get any farther, it's just an honor to be here with Julie. She's been such a wonderful ambassador for everywhere we go in aviation. Every show I ever flew with her, every time I was flying on her wing and all that stuff, it was always a treat. She's just just a true professional, and she just does a wonderful job. So thank you very much. But at any rate, so started out in my Navy career flying the T-34s, and I thought, by golly, this is a great airplane, and I'm just going to have a wonderful time with that. The next thing, that was all at Softly Field in Pensacola, Florida. The next shot was at the T-28s. If you went multi-engine or something, you flew the propellers and so on. If you ended up going with jets, then you went to the T2 Buckeye at that time. 1971 is when I started, got my wings in 73. Anyway, when we first got out to Whiting Field is where the T-28s were at. They had the Bravos and Charlies. They differ from the A models. If you guys are ever looking at an A model, it's got an 800 horsepower engine. The oil cooler will be right next to the cowl. So this, if you see a gap like this, that'll let you know that this is a big engine. It's 1,820 cubic inches, built in Paterson, New Jersey. It's got 1,425 horsepower. Back when we used to use 115, 145 fuel. And then we went to 100, 130, and now we're down to 100 low lead. So we're giving up a couple inches of manifold pressure, and probably developing, instead of 1425, we're probably down to 1250 or 1300. Anyway, the propeller that you see on was an original B model, this airplane here. But it's got a B model propeller. It's a little bit longer. The C models, which are Paul Walter's airplane, the blue one down here, you can see the tail hook and so on. That delineates a C model aircraft. So the C model had a shorter propeller, about like this, but a little bit wider chord. And it had a high pressure of small nose tires, so that when we landed on the carrier with them, and they wouldn't rebound like a big basketball, and the nose tire would stay on the deck a little bit better, and it's a lot better for arrested landings. Anyway, when I finally got to Whiting, and this is the first airplane. This is such a massive airplane. And I kept thinking, how am I ever going to fly this thing? I could walk underneath the wing. If you go to see Paul and all this stuff, you can walk. I said, how in the heck am I ever going to fly an airplane that you can walk under the wing? I mean, that was just an amazing thing, because the T-34 was a little bit smaller. Anyway, we got into the first meeting there at the student control. They, we're all standing at attention, and we have to, the guy walks in the door and says seats. So we're all kind of nervous, so whatever, all my classmates. And the guy walks in, he says, Lieutenant Commander Knight was his name. He said, for all of you students who are worried about flying a single-engine radial, just want to let you know we haven't had an engine failure now in 20 minutes. Anyway, so that's how that worked. Anyway, all worked well. We used to fly these things in transitions, so we could end up being, so you learn how to fly it, and then we ended up putting a hood over for instruments, and that was in the back seat. So when you're learning how to fly, you're in the front seat. When you did an instrument training, you were in the back seat. The instructor was in the front seat, so the first couple of approaches that I ever shot in my life were all in the back seat of these T-28s. after we finished that and the formation and so on, we went to Paul's airplane and the BT-5 and back at Sofley Field in Pensacola, and that's where we ended up landing on the carrier. And so there was a lot of training with that. The interesting thing about, as we used to shoot the approaches for the carrier, we have every bit of parasitic drag you can have on an airplane. We had the speed brake out, the tail hook down, gear, cowl flaps open, canopy open. I mean, it was just an amazing amount of drag and so on. But 82 knots as you're coming aboard, and at 325 feet, and you get the meatball, they call it, and you can pick up that, and then meatball line up and airspeed is how you fly that, and right down and touch down. So worked out great. Had a lot of fun with that. And
just a question there. You're hanging pretty close to a stall coming in.
Uh-huh.
And you probably couldn't hear a buzzer, I would assume, if you were close to the stall flying a T-28.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to watch a meatball, so there probably wasn't a light. So how did you know, what did North American do to let you know that you were getting close to a stall?
Well, in terms of the buffet, is that what you're talking about?
No,
Or they actually
I'm talking about the warning they put in, the right rudder.
Oh, yeah. They do have a little stick shaker on the C models, only on the C models too. Out on the right wing out there, they have a little stall transducer, very similar to what a lot of civilian airplanes have. And so they put a little rudder shaker on the right rudder pedal. That would let you know. But if you got that, you're a little too slow. But these LSOs on the carrier were so good that as you're flying, and they can tell if you're 81 knots, 83 knots, 84. If you weren't right on 82, the guy would, the LSO would really get you. But the nice thing about those LSOs is these guys knew every doggone thing about you, how you flew it. We had worked with them at Barron Field for a long time, doing all of our FCLPs, or field carrier landing practice. So it worked out very well. So that's kind of how the training things work. So these T-28s, they ended up being just an unbelievable airplane to train in. Then after you finished with the boat, because at that time when I got my wings, every naval aviator, the hallmark of being a naval aviator is you had to care qual. If you didn't care qual at that time, they'd say, "I'm sorry, but nice try, and we'll see you later." So you end up having to be a care qual. Nowadays, if your fleet seat or whatever you're going to fly, aircraft does not have a carrier mission, then they don't care qual you anymore. But at least I got a chance to care qual with the T-28s, and that's and as they always talk about as you're flying. I used to jog around because the Lexington was based in right there at Pensacola. I used to jog around there, and that ship was huge. It's an old Essex-class carrier from World War II, one of the stars of World War II. And as we would use that for our training carrier, the jogging thing, this thing was huge. As we were flying out the day of our care qual thing, as you got out there, the TACAN, would tell you how far you're at in the DME, the distance measuring equipment. So we're watching the DME tick down, and sure enough, we'd start to see the wake of the carrier. Then the carrier would come into view. That carrier was so doggone small. It's about that big. You kept thinking, how in the heck are you going to land on this thing? That's way too. But it turns out everything worked out good, and it was a lot of fun. So that's and so the T-28s have since just become a kind of a really. We've flown them with Paul and the Trojan Horsemen, the Trojan Thunder, Doug Rainbow here, and these two gentlemen here, and all that stuff. So we've done a lot of wonderful air shows with them and all that stuff, and it still is. It's got a great sound. It's got a lot of power and so on. So it's really is a lot of fun, and it's nice to be able to bring these airplanes and all the guys who were in the Navy and all the the people who just made our country safe. That's what we fly because we can honor them, and so it's been a real joy to be able to do that and be associated with that. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, the T-28, it's been said in many ways it compares to a World War II fighter. In some ways, it's superior. It can outturn it, it can outclimb it, and it's certainly a lot cheaper to operate. Next will be Jim Rohlf, and he'll tell us about his Vietnam T-28D5. And Jim's president of
Aviation Heritage Foundation based in Monticello, Iowa. And our focus is on honoring the aircraft and the pilot and the folks that fought the secret war in Southeast Asia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the combat aspect of the T-28. As the video showed us earlier, and Mick mentioned about the A model, that was an 800-horse aircraft that the Air Force purchased in 49 and 50. They operated them until almost the end of the 1950s, and then I think they moved on to an all-jet syllabus. The Navy came along in the mid-50s and liked what they seen with the 28 for what Mick was discussing with the carrier operations, but they needed a little more horsepower, to get back off the deck. So that's, as Mick also mentioned, that's when they went to the bigger 1,425-horse engine. So the A model was A's, and also the original B's and C's were equipped with a single hard point on each side of the aircraft for doing practice bombing, practice rocket attacks. They could also handle another drop tank there for extended operations. So, as I mentioned, by the end of the 50s, the Air Force was retiring those aircraft, and they started to filter their way into the private hands. And also, the French seen them as an aircraft that could be upgraded to a combat aircraft. So that was a T-28 Fennec. And then again, they re-engined the A model into a 1,400-horse engine and done their modifications, and they used them for counterinsurgency, mostly in Africa. So, as the war started heating up in Southeast Asia, our military was wanting to support our allies, be it the Laotians, the Thais, South Vietnamese, and they were looking for an aircraft that could do the job but yet be somewhat cost effective. And they looked back and said, gee, the T-28, I think that thing will work for us. So, but the problem was they had started to dispose of those aircraft that onto the private market, and as the attrition started to happen during the war, they had to go back to these private owners and start purchasing back these A models and reworking them to make them a D5. So we got a AT-28 D5, which is an A model that was re-engined, put strengthened wings on it to match what this aircraft has on it, with the 6 hard points as an attack aircraft. So as the Navy started to retire, and again, attrition started happening with the D5 models, they went to the B's and C's, and they reworked those, put on the 6 hard points, and a Yankee extraction seat, which, in case you need to get out of the aircraft, there was a rocket that would fire, pulling the chute out, and when the chute blossomed, it would pull the pilot out of the aircraft. So as the U.S. got more involved into the war in Southeast Asia, we operated the U.S. out of Thailand. So now we had our allies operating them, and now the U.S. decided they needed something for search and rescue operations in Laos or Thailand to recover the pilots that may have had to eject from strike missions coming back from the north. So the T-28 came up on the list right away. So out of the Nakhon Phanom Royal Thai Air Base, they established Detachment 1 of the 56, help me out here, Paul.
Zorros?
They were called the Zorros, but
Special Ops?
56 Special Operations Wing. So between the operations of finding down pilots, and they also at night, they use them to, in concert with an O1 or O2. The O1 or O2 was equipped with a starlight scope, which was the first step in our night vision capabilities, and use that on the trail to find the truck movement coming down the trail. The O1s, O2s would spot the trucks, and then the 28s would come in and do the work. As time went on, of course, then we moved on to the Sky Raider, and then carried more of a load, more range, more loiter time with the Sky Raider. So
and you've got machine guns for this too. but they don't help the aerodynamics, I understand.
Yeah, well, Mick talked about, all the drag coming onto the carrier. The Navy guys don't know what drag was. Because you hang all this stuff on here, and as we're finding out flying formation with the guys, they got a nickname for me, and I'm not going to repeat it. But there is a lot of drag.
It looks like
So it does create a lot of drag. The other thing with it is those bomb racks are actually designed to hold about 150 pounds, but they typically operate with these 250-pound low-drag bombs. On the outboard station here, we got 100-pound white phosphorus bombs that they use for marking targets, maybe for a bigger strike aircraft to hit a target. So the 28 seen a lot of action in Southeast Asia. The South Vietnamese Air Force operated them, the Thais ran them, the Laotians, and it was a very versatile aircraft, even for the U.S. Air Force. So,
Great. And Jim also has a Sky Raider, a Huey, an L1 or O1 Bird Dog.
O1 Bird
a lot
Dog,
of
as I
Vietnam
mentioned.
era stuff.
The focus of our mission for our foundation is to honor those that flew those aircraft and give everybody the stories that those created and honor those folks that flew them.
Right. And our particular T-28, the CIA took it over to the Congo, and they let the CIA-trained pilots that did the Babe and Pigs fight the Cuban Fidel Castro communists over in the Congo, and it's got bullet holes all over it, patched. So thanks, Jim. Next is Dan here, and maybe you've heard about the Reno Air Races, but Dan's plane is very unique, and I'll let Dan take it from there. If you want to get up around your plane, that works too.
No, that's okay. My name is Dan Kirkland. It's been great hearing from Mick and Julie and all that, and Tom, but I'm the civilian side of it. So I'm civilian trained, started out as a private pilot, worked my way up to commercial. But what I'm here to tell you is that, if you want to invest the time and the financial resources, anybody can do this. Anybody can buy these planes. Anybody can learn. There's a great NATA organization that will help you train. There's formation clinics that people will come. You'll fly and you go to these clinics. They'll put you in your back. They'll put trained instructors like these guys in the back seat, and we'll train you up and get you into formation. And you can be flying at air shows and at Oshkosh as well. What makes the 28 really, as compared to like the I own a T6 as well, but what makes the 28 great in this kind of environment is that, it's loud, it's big, it's easy to fly. The hard part of learning how to fly a 28 isn't really the stick and rudders, it's the engine management, what they call the boost, the overboosting, the underboosting. Understand the relationship between the RPM and the power settings, which you don't really worry too much about on the smaller engines. But with the bigger engines and the centrifugal force that you have inside those engines, you have to just make sure that you're taking care of it. That's really the hard part about it. A lot of these planes have been converted. A lot of the old electronics have been taken out, so a lot of there's solid state stuff in there. The radios have been upgraded. So a lot of the maintenance issues and the worries that you had about the airplane when they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, all of that most of that has been taken out of the airplanes, and you end up with a very robust, not low maintenance, because everybody would kill me if I said that. But
We would kill you.
But if you keep up the maintenance, it's not that bad. You can live with it and make it work. What makes what makes the 28 great is the speed range. So if you want to go fly with T6s, you can. You can fly at 130 knots, 120, whatever the T6 can do. But if you get a chance to go fly with an L-39, or even you'll see some of these in the Heritage or the Tailhook flying with F-18s, if you boost up the power, you can go fast. So you can go, a buddy of mine flew the Tailhook for a year in the 28, and part of the requirement was straight and level at 215 knots. If you look at this 8,500-pound airplane, it's hard to get it up at 215 knots straight and level. But if you put it up what they call METO power, which is 40 inches of manifold pressure and 2,500 RPM, that technically you can run that all day long. That's max continuous. At max continuous, you can run about 215, 218. And the one year he did it here, he was the lead guy, and there was 2 F-18s and a Corsair in the slot. And the only airplane you heard was the T-28, because that poor little guy was running, his squirrels were running as fast as they could to try to get these guys going. But that's what makes the 28 unique for civilians, for people like me, and that's really a big advantage. And it's a great cross-country airplane, carries 179 gallons of gas, so you got about a 550 nautical range, 2.5 hours. And so I live in Kingman, Arizona. We went to Sheboygan because we had a formation clinic last week. It's 2 stops, and I left at 7 in the morning, and I was parked at Sheboygan at 3 in the afternoon. And you can do that easy. It's got it's really a great cross-country. It's roomy. There's a big storage underneath the airplane where you can pack your luggage. So it's that kind of stuff makes the plane a really unique airplane. In regards to my particular airplane, a person by the name of Wayne Brooks, he owned JE Pistons and Engineering back in the 80s and 90s, and he was a big T-28 guy. And they had done demo races at Kingman, at the Reno for 2 years, 28s. And they were a big hit, because they're loud and they're big and they're going around the pylons, everybody, and they're close. Well, Wayne had it, he had a lot of money and a lot of time, and he had the resources, and he said, well, I'm going to make a 28 that will beat a Mustang around the pylons. And pretty much everybody poo-pooed him and said, well, you're crazy. But what he did then is he went back to his engineers at his piston company. They designed special pistons and cylinders for him. What he did is he went back and got all the old overrun 10-over cylinders that nobody wanted, and he made a brand new aluminum piston and a set of rings for that. And then he went through the whole airplane. He stripped that particular airplane as an A model. It went to the Dominican Republic. It came back, sat around. Then it was converted to a D. If you notice up in the top, it was civilian converted. You can tell by one of the things is you can see the roll cage at the top. That's an A model mod. Most, if you see Jim's D, most of the time they took that out. But in this case, they left it in because it was done by civilians. So they have the bigger wings, and he did all the engine. So he stripped out, he took over 400 pounds of wiring alone out of the airplane. Stripped the whole airplane down. It's got, if you look at my propeller blades, they're different. They're not rounded. They're flat. Those are what they call tracker blades. They were used on the S2 tracker for the RPM. So he used those. They give you more bite. He had the engine rebuilt. It had water injection in it. He changed the nose case gearing around so the prop would take a bigger bite at high RPMs. So he did his work on that. And then he didn't want anybody to know, because if he let, the Reno at the time had plenty of Mustangs and plenty of people to race. And the idea that they would let a T-28 into the unlimited class, they weren't really rah-rah, and those guys weren't really keen on it. So what Wayne wanted to do was kind of sandbag his way around and do just enough to get qualified. And then come race day, he was going to put the water injection on it, and he was going to beat the Mustangs. So he had a pilot named Skip Holm, which if you guys know anything about the Reno Air races, he's very, very qualified. He won the Unlimited race in Dago Red, and they were friends. So Skip gets in the airplane on training on qualifying day, and they had already done the pylons before secretly. They knew what the plane could do. So he did 303 miles an hour around the pylons, just barely enough to make it. And so they land, and he gets out, and he's talking to Wayne, and everybody says, man, we're just where we want to be. We want to be just barely in there. Then they get the official thing, the official time from this timing and scoring, and he only did 298. So they wouldn't let him race. And Skip, was furious, and Wayne was furious, and they all knew what he had done. But they were adamant that he wasn't going to race in the Unlimited. So Wayne took the airplane, flew it back to his hangar, put it in his hangar, and it never left. It never flew again. So when I got a hold of this, Wayne was losing his medical. He was getting out of the T-28s. We were really good friends. He said, come up, and he had another T-28 that he flew around. He said, come up and you can, for a small price, you can have all of this stuff. So I ended up with the T-28 with 7 hours on it. It had been sitting, so I had gone through it. I've since gone through it, and I have about 700 hours on it now, and it's great. It's a great airplane. It's when I first got here, I had to learn how to fly it because it was so much faster. When I would fly in formation, I would be somewhere 300 to 400 RPM less than the other guys, and at least 2 or 3 inches less. So there is a huge difference in that airplane. The story, from what I've been told, 348 miles an hour is what they could do around that pylon. If they could do that, they would beat the P-40s, the Wildcats. They beat a lot of the stock Mustangs as well. So Wayne, took that to his grave, that he knew his T-28 could beat the Mustangs around the pylons if he was given half the chance. But he wasn't, and that's the story of that. Another thing, just real quick, part of this deal, guys, is if you get involved in these groups, and you do buy, whether it's a T6 or a T-28 or whatever, it's the people that are in that community that give the plane a special meaning to you and the people that you meet. It's the reason why you have the airplane. I've had this T-28 since 1999. I have 1,800 hours in it. It's the people that keep the airplane add value to me. And you guys really, if you're into it and you want to participate, it's worth it. And the people you meet are all the walks of life, and they are just fantastic. So that's
Thanks,
all I got.
Dan. And I think that's true. Paul Poberesny always said it was the airplane that brought us together, but it's the people that bring us back. And I've known Dan since 2000, and everybody up here I've met through it, and I know them really well through that. So the people, it's a community. We're running out of time, but one of the questions is how much does it cost to buy one of these? And depends on the condition. Obviously, these are 70-year-old aircraft.
75.
Well, since the first one, 75. It's the 75th anniversary since the first flight. 200,000 is what you really should. There's people that say, I have found one for 90,000. The most expensive plane you can buy is a cheap Warbird. It's gonna really kill you to get it restored. But there's a lot of nice ones out in that range. And the T-34s right now they're bonanza, so they're easy to insure. They're running a little bit higher than the T-28s, but the T-28s per pound, come on. That's a bargain. A guy in our field just bought a Cirrus, and he told me he paid $1.4 million for that. And I go, there's no comparison here. So it's what you like. I guess we got time for just a couple questions. And then if you want to come down and ask us, we'll be here. We can tell you the difference between the B's and the A's and all that. Any questions?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yep. We answered everything.
That's good. We've answered all of them, it looks like. Well, you're welcome to come down here and talk to us. Julie, you've got some copies of your book, right?
A few books, and I have hero cards, the cards.
And the cards?
I'll sign them here.
And you want to sign them right here,
Sure.
or they're in your
No,
the
they're
back?
right here in the airplane.
So if you'd like to get one of those, we've got one hanging in our hangar. Come down and see
Dated
Julie.
1979, or I'm teasing.
So come on down, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Paul.